What are some common facts that people believe to be true even if the existing evidence states the contrary? Camels don't use their humps to store water. They use them to store fat reserves, because storing fat reserves around the body like humans would keep them too warm, so they have it all in one spot. That is very interesting and I had no idea. Thank you. Worms come out when it rains because they are drowning in their holes. No, not really. They mostly come out because when it rains heavily, they are able to survive on the surface for much longer and move around, finding new areas to feed and more worms to breed with. Cutting your facial hair makes it grow in thicker. I had a full-on argument with an individual who firmly believed that genetics played no possible role in hair growth whatsoever. I have never been more perplexed or angry in my entire life. Sincerely, Bald at 25. That Einstein was a bad student and was bad at math. It's just not true. He got average high marks and was really just disdainful of the structure of school, and he was good at math. Physics is like 90% math. I get why people share it. It's to make struggling students feel better about themselves. But can't we tell them about something else instead of lying? Just show them the salary of a plumber or welder compared to their teacher's salary. That ought to cheer them up. A few people still believe that opening windows before a tornado to even the pressure will save their house from damage. Some also still believe trailer parks attract tornadoes and that random sacred landmarks can protect cities from tornadoes. People still think an undercover cop has to tell you they're a cop. How does that even make sense? Months of preparations ruined on the first day because someone happened to ask the magic question. Cops are allowed to lie to you and they will pretend to be your friend to get what they need from you. Side note, even if you're innocent of a crime, the first words from your mouth should be "I want a lawyer," and you don't provide any information until you have one. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. That 30 used to be considered ancient back when the average lifespan was 25 or whatever. The average is offset by a huge number of child deaths. 30 was never ancient. Even hunter-gatherer societies had people routinely living into their 60s. Vikings never actually drank from skulls of enemies. This was based on a mistranslation of Old Norse poetry in which they refer to drinking from horns. They never had horns on their helmets either. A lot of people think they can burn belly fat by doing crunches or slim their arms down by doing push-ups, but targeted fat loss isn't possible and there's no evidence to suggest it is. True. One analogy for this I heard involves a pool of water and a bucket. If you take water out of the pool with the bucket, burning calories to burn fat, even if you scoop in one place it will remove water evenly across the pool. Some people's genetics store fat more in certain parts of the body and you can't spot reduced body fat. Lightning never strikes twice in the same place. In fact it does, and frequently. You don't want to be there when it happens. If it didn't, lightning rods would be useless. A person drowning is not likely to be flailing wildly and yelling like in the movies. Drowning can often happen with mostly silence, especially with kids. Read up on the signs. It might save a life. I was drowning and lost consciousness when I was 5. I was told I barely made a sound. I went under, sucked in lungs full of water when I tried to cry out in surprise and blacked out. If it wasn't for my dad's instincts and quick action I'd be dead. You can tap a block to see if it is loose in Jenga, which is stated quite explicitly in the rules, and frick you everyone who said I couldn't. Wait, what the frick, this blew up for no reason. It's not out until it's free of the system or it falls. I remember you can even try to put it back before it's out to try a different one. Maybe that's house rules, though. Alpha theory in dog training. The researcher that originally described the dominance theory was watching captive wolves at a zoo pack that was artificially created from unrelated specimens. The hierarchy in this curated collection was determined through fights and struggles for dominance, and this dynamic was then applied to domestic dogs and how they view themselves in relation to humans. This drove the dominate your dog style of training popular with Cesar Millan and his acolytes. When the scientific community was able to observe a wild wolf pack, however, they discovered that wild packs are family units and operate much the same way, with a parental breeding pair at the top and their younger offspring forming the pack, sometimes several litters at a time. As the pups grow older, they break off and form their own packs. The researcher that dismantled the theory, David Meck, described it thusly: attempting to apply information about the behavior of assemblages of unrelated captive wolves to the familial structure of natural packs has resulted in considerable confusion. Such an approach is analogous to trying to draw inferences about human family dynamics by studying humans in refugee camps. Also, dogs are not wolves. Unless you're living with a hybrid, anything that applies to a wolf will not automatically apply to a dog. Cracking your knuckles too often will give you arthritis. Nope. No conclusive study has ever backed this up. It just releases the gas from the synovial fluid in your joints, which is neither good nor bad. Oh, that's good to know. As a kid I just accepted my fate because I liked the crack sound. I scrolled fairly far down and did not see what came to mind for me. A lot of people think blood is blue inside of the body, and that it only appears red because of the oxygen or something in the air. I tried to explain this to a past co-worker, who was a former nurse, and she wasn't having any of it. Turns out a lot of otherwise smart people believe that with no evidence. But blood is always red, just darker at some points of circulation in the body. And it's very easily disproved too. I'm a phlebotomist and we draw blood into evacuated vacuum tubes. There's very little air in them and the blood is still red. That if you touch a baby animal, like a bird or rabbit, its mother will neglect it and it will die. That is a myth. It was just a way for parents to get their kids to leave baby animals alone. Yet, a few weeks ago, a baby bird fell out of its nest in our backyard. It survived and my dad was going to put it out of its misery until I told him that this myth wasn't true. We put it in a cardboard box on the table closest to its tree with some food and water and just left it alone. Its parents found it the next day and were bringing it food, and within a couple of days, it was gone. That punk in the UK was a reaction response to Margaret Thatcher. Punk broke in the UK in 1976-7, when the sitting government was Labour, or an alliance of Labour and other left-wing parties. Thatcher's Conservatives weren't elected until 1979. Truth is, Margaret Thatcher was built in a lab as a response to the emerging punk movement. Chicken is cooked when it is no longer pink and the juices run clear. In fact, it's cooked when it hits 75°C, 165°F. And that's it. What it looks like depends on the cut. Chicken breast often has significant pink in it when it hits the temperature, which is why most people complain about dry, boring chicken, because they overcook it. On the flip side, wings can look cooked when they aren't, which is why they're a major source of food poisoning. The most important thing I learned working in a commercial kitchen: 165°F isn't even required. 165 means it's instantly safe, but a lower temp for longer is also fine. Kenji prescribes aiming for 150 should be good for breast. The most people only use 10% of their brain's capacity thing. Utterly ridiculous. The brain is a giant, metabolically expensive, staggeringly complex structure. Why on earth would our bodies grow something like that and then not use it? You're almost certainly right, but it just makes me think of my friend that bought a £2,500 MacBook and only uses it for Word and web browsing. That being in a cold place causes common cold. I've been trying to convince my mother for 30 years that going to bed with wet hair will not make you wake up with a cold. She will believe it to the grave. The fact that resistant and proof, i.e. water resistant and waterproof, is two separate things and are not the same. There is so many people that believe them to be the same. Water resistant, if you drop it in a puddle for a quick second, it will be fine. Will not survive a torrential downpour. Waterproof, will literally keep out any and all water. The only points where water could possibly get in are the openings, and as much as we tried to idiot-proof those, idiots are a lot craftier than water. That cow is giving milk because that's how this animal work. They don't believe me when I'm telling them that she needs to have baby to start producing milk. McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit is an example of a frivolous lawsuit. McDonald's was told multiple times by the health department not to serve coffee so hot. Her wounds were horrendous. My biggest pet peeve is when people say sweating is an effective way to rid your body of toxins. First of all, what toxins? Second of all, our bodies are made with an effective waste system that gets rid of things we don't need or that are harmful to us. It's called peeing and pooping. Sweating is our body's way of cooling itself down. It's not a waste removal system. It's just a quick way to get dehydrated and lose a lot of sodium, which we need. So I have a Geiger counter, and sometimes I'll bring it out just for fun when I'm hanging out with friends. I cannot even tell you how many people freak out when they see a number that isn't 0.00 on the screen. In reality, a little bit of radiation isn't at all dangerous. In fact, we're surrounded by ionizing radiation due to things ranging from naturally occurring elements in the soil to cosmic radiation. Levels will rise near things like granite countertops due to small amounts of thorium and uranium. During a flight, radiation levels go up by 1025x plus what they are on the surface, due to less shielding from cosmic radiation by the atmosphere. Moral of the story: from what I've seen, people tend to think that radiation is some terrifying thing, and that it doesn't take a lot to give someone cancer or radiation sickness, when in reality, it takes a lot. 420 did not originate from the LA police or penal code for marijuana use. The use of 420 started in 1971 at San Rafael High School, where it indicated the time, 420, when a group of students would go to smoke. There's no such thing as an alpha wolf. The naturist who first described them spent years trying to clarify the matter, but the idea just caught on too hard. The dominant wolves in the pack he had been observing when he came up with the alpha wolf theory were, he later discovered, just the parents of the rest of them. Groups of more than one family do converge and engage in social activity, but the notion that wolves live according to a hierarchical structure is pure fantasy. Yet, most wolf packs are family groups. The so-called alpha male is basically dad. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, doesn't refer to OMG I can't take it when the red jelly beans are in the blue jar or anything to do with liking symmetry or being a neat freak. Actual victims of OCD do things like stand by the light switch in a room and repeatedly flick it on and off for hours and mentally break down halfway through, or making gestures as if they're washing their hand by a basin despite there being no water and that they simply cannot control the urge to make those gestures. The word disorder indicates, among other things, that the symptoms are severe enough to downright disrupt one's daily life and stop you from carrying out your normal routines and activities. People should stop saying things like I'm just so OCD. I can't help but round up the numbers, as people are misinformed enough about this disorder. That 12-step programs get addicts clean. The truth is that their efficacy hovers at 5%. That's exactly the same as quitting cold turkey. There's plenty of researched and scientifically tested methods that work better. It's just that the AA model of always an addict, nothing else works is so ubiquitous in American, and to an extent other countries, culture that most people, including a lot of addicts, think that's all there is. Having a baby will save your relationship or make an irresponsible man suddenly man up for his family. Babies only amplify all your existing problems and you should not have them until you are ready. There is no scientific evidence to show GMOs are any worse or better than non-GMOs. All they do is protect against pesticides and get a bigger yield. My only issue with GMOs isn't the product itself, but rather the intellectual property laws associated with them. A dog or cat having a wet, dry, cold, warm nose doesn't mean crap. It's an old wives' tale. Now if there's coughing, sneezing or discharge from the nose or eyes, then take your pet to vet. A very dry nose and gums can indicate dehydration. You don't not lose 90% if your body heat through your head. If you could, you should be able to wear a knit cap and go outside naked in the winter and make naked snow angels in your neighbor's yard and not get severe hypothermia that results in a rather embarrassing trip to the emergency room. Hypothetically. Sugar rushes. Some studies were done and it's mainly just little kids acting like little kids, and their parents expecting them to act up after having sugar from decades of saying that's what is supposed to happen. No evidence actually points to them being any more worked up. It's something I've brought up and been ridiculed for it, and despite saying just Google it, I'm still perceived as wrong. I think it's a case of psychological priming. If you expect a certain type of behavior, you will be much more attentive looking for it than you would otherwise. Since we all know sugar sends kids into a hyperactive state, then we are much more likely interpret any energetic playing as excessive even when it's the same as normal. That looks don't matter. Of course they do. Your physical appearance literally influences everything you do, for the better or worse, and it's much more influential than people would want to believe. That you should drink at least 2 liters of water a day. There is only some 1930 TS recommendation that you should consume about 2 liters of water a day, but it includes water in your food. Even though it is probably better to drink more water, it is not well studied and there is no scientific proof. It was a push to get people to drink more. Now that we looked into it, we're supposed to drink way whenever we're thirsty, not a set amount. People have a misconception that we work less today than we have throughout history. In actuality, hunter-gatherers worked an average of 3 to 5 hours a day. Ancient civilization farmers only worked during seasonal and agricultural periods, averaging about 10 hours a day for only 120 days a year. Roman documents show that most artisans only worked about 6 hours a day from the hours of 6 a.m. to midday. They were given multiple holidays from frequent festival days. Medieval farmers and peasants worked about 8-hour days in the summer, but worked less in winter months due to less daylight, averaging only about 5.5 hours of work each day. It wasn't until the mid-18th century that work days became longer, with the invention of replaceable part. Workers in London in 1750 worked 11 hours per day, 5 days a week. Sunday was the day of rest. But those in gainful employment also skipped work on Monday, which was dubbed Sun Monday at the time. The Industrial Revolution was the kickstart of long work days and few holidays or leave. Factory workers in mid-19th century England worked 16 hours a day, 311 days per year. Comparatively, the average office worker today in the USA works 7.8 hours a day, 311 days per year. TLDR. We work more today than almost every other generation leading up to the 18th century. I wish that more people understood this. It's insane the number of adults I know that think blood is blue inside the body and only turns red when it is exposed to air. That the sex of a child is determined by the woman. The actual case is that the lucky sperm of the man determines the sex. It is more often than not a 50/50 on male or female offspring. I think this came from a certain British king, Henry VIII. That sugar makes you hyper, or makes kids hyper. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. People have a perception it does though, essentially a placebo effect. That penises on Roman statues are small because small penises were a sign of intelligence. Or rather, large penises were barbaric. This comes from one quote in an old writing that is really suspect. The main reason is to give focus on the piece of art, the statue. If the guy was hung, or even normal sized, all eyes would completely focus on that. But if made small, you don't. This is a common practice in art, and guess what? It works. Most of the internet seems to believe that lose and losing should be spelled loose and loosing. This is, in fact, not true. Type 1 diabetes can be cured by herbs, or oils, or this new diet, or mother, let's make a deal. I'll try your crap if you first let me remove your eyes with a melon baller, and you can use your woo-woo crystal crap to get your vision back. Oh, suddenly not so sure of your cure? Why not? Not like being blind is fatal, where me going off insulin would kill me pretty dang quickly. If you pick up a baby bird you can return it to its nest. The mother will not abandon it just because you touched it. Wildlife biologists and rehabbers do it all the time. Total myth. That the flu vaccine causes you to get the flu. I hear this every single year. I got the shot and 24 hours later I got the flu. A lot of people still think that ADHD is a fake disorder. The brain scans of a brain with ADHD is literally shaped differently than a regular brain. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.